The Earth was long gone from the night sky, from the surface of the barren moon. It was nothing but a smear of grit in space ruins distributed along an orbit. The ghost of a blue world reduced to a ring. The resource wars hadn't just ended nations. They had ended the view. Draven Cole watched that smear as his skiff bled Delta V and fell toward Selene 9's landing grid. His hands moved without thinking, adjusting thrust, trimming the vector on short. Neat bursts that didn't waste reaction mass. The vessel was a patchwork of plates and Prair's 3 different manufacturers. Just in the Attitude jets, an aftermarket nav core that lagged half a second behind his touch. A reactor whose power curve on his HUD pulsed like a fever chart. He kept his eyes on the glide path anyway, as if discipline could will the numbers into compliance. "Give me 30 more seconds," he murmured to the failing machine. He spoke to it the way he used to speak to Kiro on long drifts, soft, wry, never expecting an answer. Kiro had been the steady voice when the black went loud. Kiro didn't have a voice anymore. Space had a way of taking nouns and handing you back silence. The colony rose under him. A constellation set in regolith domes like broken pearls, ribs of struts exposed to vacuum, a scattering of collapsed warehouses half submerged under drifts of electrostatic dust. The landing grid's beacon was dead, but its shadow still made a perfect X on the gray. He burned on that point, felt the skiff shudder as it kissed down hard and skated. The skids biting fine powder. A long breath, a second. The reactor icon on his HUD jittered and dropped by another 0.1%. "Touchdown," he said. To nobody. To the skiff. "Count your blessings." He killed the main bus, leaving only life support and the nav core on a trickle. Temperature differentials in a dead ship created frost and cracked seals. He'd seen men freeze from their own cleverness. As the systems powered down, he felt the ship's remaining hum step back from him. Like a tired animal settling in the dust, Draven unstrapped. The cockpit smelled like hot plastic and the metallic tang of filtered air. He hung for a second in that smell, in the memory of ships that didn't cough or complain. Then reached for his suit. The suit was old, but old things carried lessons. He slid into the inner layer, sealed the ring at his neck, and checked the inner locks by feel, shoulder, hip, wrist. The outer shell clicked into place. The helmet dropped with a soft thunk and spun down onto the locking collar. His HUD bloomed oxygen 92%, scrubbers nominal, coolant circulation good. On the right edge of the display, a persistent alert blinked, reactor output degrading. He muted it. He'd come for parts, not reminders. Cold to Selene 9. He set into the vacuum, a habit that never left him. "If anybody's home and feeling neighborly, I'll be borrowing from your garden." Static. Not even the clean one of empty channels. This was the dirty crackle of cables that had corroded in their sockets. He palmed the hatch release. The seal complained from disuse, then suddenly remembered it had been built by humans for humans and gave. Cold light knifed into the cockpit a long white blade that made color a rumor. He climbed down into lunar gravity and felt his body argue with the fraction weight. Muscles misfiring with invisible memory. Each step was a bounce held on a leash. The world outside held the particular stillness of vacuum, where nothing moved unless prodded. His skiff sat in the middle of the scarred landing grid like a beetle crouched on a dry leaf, carbon scoring fanning behind it. Beyond, the bones of Selene 9 reached up out of drifts like ribs on a bleached carcass. He took it in as an engineer first. The primary dome had sheared open along its equator, teeth of shattered glass and graphene glittering faintly where sunlight caught them. A secondary dome to the east had caved in entirely. Its support lattice twisted down like a net someone had failed to haul. Beyond that, a line of gantries leading toward a cluster of sealed cylinders had stacks, probably the cheap kind you could bolt onto a pressure corridor without paying for new foundations. The hangar was a darker cut in the landscape, a rectangle where black met gray. He walked. Regolith behaved like something alive underfoot, every step puffing up a little halo of dust that didn't fall so much as rearrange itself. The sun sat low over the jagged horizon, projecting sharp-edged shadows so crisp he could have used them as rulers. He could feel the fine particles trying to cling to his suit with the moon's mad static. Little teeth gnawing at fabric. He passed the remains of a perimeter barricade waist-high, portable, bearing a stenciled logo so scoured it took him a moment to recognize it. Helios Extractive Consortium. The heck. They had been on both sides of the wars, selling to whatever hand held currency that still held value. He looked away. The first airlock stood a dozen meters ahead, built into a sloped berm of regolith shaped by machines. The external door hung slightly ajar, a gap too neat to be random. After impacts, doors bent. This one had been opened once and never closed. Draven knelt, brushed the threshold with gloved fingers. The dust pattern told him a story. Someone had gone in, long after the initial abandonment. Tracking boot scallops through the gray. Those tracks had softened centuries, softened everything here, but they were there. Under the fine veil, a few pairs, heavy tread. Purposeful rote. He toggled a wrist tool, and a thin probe slid out, glowing blue at the tip. He traced the seam. The indicator stayed blue, vacuum in the lock, no trapped pressure. He put his shoulder into the door. Seals that hadn't flexed in ages gave way with a reluctant sigh he heard through his suit. More than through the air. The panel swung wider, away from him, revealing a short tunnel lined with frost. He stepped into Selene 9. His suit lights painted the corridor in moving geometry. The interior surfaces were scabbed with a rime of ice that glittered when his beam passed. That told him there had been water in the air once, trapped and frozen when power failed and temperatures dropped. It also told him the place had not been breached to vacuum everywhere, or that some systems had managed to hold for a time after the last human breath here. He cycled the inner door manually, the wheel stuttering, and entered the lock proper. The control panel was dead, but a printed checklist was bolted beside it, laminated under a film now crazed with microcracks. He read it out of habit, the performative ritual of safety in a place where none existed anymore. Depressurize, check indicator lights, confirm external clearance. He caught himself smiling. Humans had written rules against the void and then convinced themselves the void would follow. The door into the colony resisted harder. He braced, pushed, and felt the hinge stutter forward as flakes of frost exploded into the vacuum, like glittering dust. Inside, the corridor yawned, long and dim, walls curving up and around in a half-cylinder. His lamp found murals on the left, figures in crayon paint whose colors had surrendered to time. Families holding hands under spiky stars. A green ball with a smiling face that must have once been Earth, before the children learned to draw it as a ring. He stopped longer than he meant to. His throat tightened. He thought of Kiro teaching a too young stowaway to patch a suit sleeve with tape and stubbornness. The way Kiro's big hands were gentle over small mistakes. He left the paintings and made himself a promise he didn't say out loud. He would not be the one to scuff them away. He marked his path with a thin polymer thread he clipped from his belt. It unspooled behind him as he moved, a pale line ghosting along the corridor. The first rule of the dead: leave yourself a way back to the living. The colony's layout came back the way maps came back if you'd studied enough stations. Main corridor like a spine, vents along the ceiling, maintenance hatches at regular intervals. He popped one hatch, checked inside, then grimaced. Rats of the vacuum. The swelling and shrinking of metal had already turned the couplings brittle. The power trunks were braided high-capacity leads, triple-shielded. They're to feed something that drank in megawatts. If the hangar held anything useful, those lines would lead to it like veins leading to a heart. He passed a plaque set into the wall. Selene 9, Estate, 2183, Lux in Tenebrae. Light and darkness. The Latin made him like them more. Asterisk beyond the hydroponics bay, the corridor opened into a broad pressure hub, with doors yawning dark on 5 sides. He swept his light. In the center stood a cluster of benches bolted to the deck in a circle. People had sat here, daily, facing one another. In the low gravity, a dropped cup would take its time to grace the floor. A leftover toy printed plastic dinosaur, 2 legs, tail snapped off, floated in the corner where pockets of static held dust and memories. He let it float. A ping flickered in the corner of his HUD, a faint frequency spike just above the thermal noise of his suit. It came in like an itch. He turned slowly, letting the suit antennas try to get a vector. The spike softened, then sharpened again when he faced northeast. Not signal, not intentional, more like an intermittent electrical arc, something trying to become a circuit and failing. He tagged it, set the HUD to whisper if it grew teeth. He needed parts. He needed them more than the ghosts needed his attention. He forced himself away from the benches and set his route: maintenance, power distribution, reactor room if there had been one on site. Colonies like this often used external pebbled reactors buried under regolith for shielding. But the distribution nodes would still hold converters, regulators, high-grade superconductors if he was lucky. He could cannibalize coil windings if he had to. He could get the skiff to limp. He crossed through an equipment bay whose floor was a mosaic of outlines, where machines had been lifted and carried away, leaving only their silhouettes behind in compressed dust. His lamp caught a cluster of lockers. He popped two. One held suits, sealed in long plastic, that had yellowed and gone fragile. He took a moment to slice one package open, working with care. The suit inside had never been worn. It was smaller than his, built for a slender woman or a tall child. He ran his gloved hand down the torso and felt the stiffness of new polymers. He left it where it was. New life deserved a use better than patching old. The next locker held a tool he had not expected to find: a portable vacuum-rated spindle for rewinding field coils. It was heavy and awkward, but he imagined the skiff's schematics in his head, pictured the reactor's tired throat trying to sing with a broken voice. He strapped the spindle to his pack and felt the change to his balance. In low gravity, everything lied to you. Weight wasn't the same as inertia. He would have to relearn his own momentum. He followed the fat power trunks when he could, but they vanished into bulkheads and floors and reappeared in improbable places, like roots of an old tree. Twice he detoured around collapsed ceilings the moon's thermal cycles had pulled at the metal, until joints cracked, then pulled again until the pieces fell. He moved through all of it with the workman's patience he prized in himself. He didn't believe in heroics. He believed in doing one small careful thing after another until the day let you live. A small careful thing saved him. At the threshold of a narrow cross corridor, his boot found nothing. He froze, 1 foot over sudden emptiness, and drew back slow. The corridor beyond had been devoured by a void where the floor used to be. A neat rectangle of nothing falling to decks. He edged his lamp over the hole. The beam fell away into a tangle of pipes and fractured panels. His suit's micro-lidar chirped and drew him a ghostly wire frame in the hut, a path across the hole, along the half-sheared flange of a ventilation duct if he wanted to risk it. He didn't, not yet. He scanned left. An emergency ladder ran down another shaft, its rung plastics cracked but intact. He anchored his safety line and climbed, the spindle on his back making his world wider than the shaft wanted. Halfway down, the ping in his HUD rose and fell again, like a heart irregularly remembering itself. Closer now. He looked up at the power trunks. He looked down at darkness, and at the thin coat of frost that still clung to the inner walls in places. Sublimate crystals that grew in feathery patterns and caught his light like tiny knives. When he breathed, his own air sounded like a foreign sea inside his helmet. The lower level opened into a space that did not match the printed floor plan he'd scraped from a forgotten server 3 stations ago. This room was wider than the diagrams, and the trunks here were thicker than he'd seen elsewhere. All bundled and armored. He ran a hand across the casing. The insulation here was intact, the clamps still tensioned. For a second, the irrational part of his brain wanted to believe someone had been here yesterday, tightening bolts, humming a tune. Then his lamp found the reason for the difference, a secondary plaque he would have missed, if not for a well-placed smear of lunar dust. Hangar distribution node 2. He stopped and let that settle through him. A hangar meant vehicles. Vehicles meant engines. Engines meant parts. He saw his skiff in his mind, saw the reactor bar drop another notch, saw himself not dying here. He traced one of the branch trunks to a breaker box and opened it. Inside the cavity, something had built a nest out of polymer fibers and manufacturer tags lunar spiders in there. Absurd silk, little robots that used static to clump dust into strands and weave it around their eggs. He nudged the nest aside gently with the back of a glove and pulled a set of breakers. Nothing happened, no snap of arc, not even a complaint. The line had been cold for a very long time. He checked his oxygen, 88%. He should go back, mark this on his slate, come again in a second pass with a plan. The cautionary voice that sounded in his head had Kiro's timbre. He turned to go. His suit light fell across a section of wall where the frost didn't cling. The metal there had been warmed sometime in the last century, enough to force ice to sublime it away. And stay away a slight change, but in a place where nothing ever changed without a cost. It was a signature. He lifted his palm to it and felt, through the pressure glove and insulation, the barest suggestion of, not heat exactly, stored memory, a system that had once been less dead than the others. The ping came again, as if the room had cleared its throat. Draven's mouth went dry. He touched the wall a second time and imagined a heartbeat, slow and patient under buried ribs. He pictured the hangar beyond, pictured whatever drank from these trunks. He didn't let himself picture hope. Hope was a kind of radiation you had to meter carefully. He anchored a ribbon of polymer to the node bulkhead and began to lay more line, marking a straight, sensible route back to an exit point on his HUD. He would leave now. He would get the spindle to the skiff. He would return with a clean head. He would not run. Running in low gravity got you killed. At the pressure hub. He paused by the benches and the plastic dinosaur, and he did the one thing he allowed himself. He set his gloved finger against the mural of the smiling green world and drew a tiny ring around it, as if giving it a new galaxy to belong to. Then he shut off his lamp for a heartbeat and stood inside the starless quiet, where his breath was the only weather. Outside the airlock, the sun had shifted, shadows stalking different lines. His skiff waited, black and patient. He clambered up, cycled through, and sealed the hatch behind him with a careful hand. The cockpit lights came alive in a dim cascade. The reactor icon on his HUD was lower again, a falling tooth on a comb. He unclipped the spindle, rested it across the co-pilot's seat, and let himself lean back for the first time since the burn. Selene 9 has a hangar. He told the ship, because saying it made it a thing he could return to, and something in there remembers being awake. The skiff said nothing. The ring where Earth used to be glittered, faint and cruel, beyond the cockpit glass. Draven flexed his fingers, feeling sweat cool on his palms, and closed his eyes. He was not here for nostalgia. He was here for parts. He repeated that to himself like a prayer, and it did the strange thing prayers sometimes do. It made the truth feel less dangerous and more necessary. He set a timer on the HUD for 2 hours. In that window he would rest, calibrate, and plan a route to the hangar with fewer surprises. And when the alarm chimed, he would go back into the ghost colony, following the thick cable veins toward the dark room where the wall didn't keep frost. He would go like a man walks toward a door he both fears and needs, metal in his step and nothing extravagantly hopeful in his chest. Outside, the dust settled in patterns only the moon understood. Inside, Draven Cole breathed, and the dead place waited. Draven Cole slept in shifts of half-consciousness. Rest wasn't something you took whole anymore. It came in fragments, jagged naps that ended the moment your body remembered it was alone. When the HUD timer pulsed in his visor, he opened his eyes without surprise. The spindle sat beside him, mute and patient. He strapped it down against the bulkhead, ate a ration bar that tasted like compressed chalk, and forced himself through a series of stretches in the cramped cockpit, until his muscles felt less like wire. Then he sealed the helmet again, cycled the lock, and stepped once more into the pale silence of Selene 9. The path he'd marked with his polymer line led him back into the colony's ribs without trouble. The dust remembered him. His boots fit into yesterday's prints as if he were retracing someone else's walk. That unsettled him like he was haunting himself. He followed the line to the pressure hub with its circle of benches. The dinosaur toy still floated, drifting just far enough to brush a wall before settling again in a static pocket. Draven didn't touch it. He kept his lamp angled toward the northeast corridor, the one that carried the heavy power trunks. That was the artery. That would take him to the hangar. The corridors grew stranger the deeper he went. At first it was little things, a scattering of mugs still magnetized to a rack, each rim coated with a lace of frost. A flight of maintenance drones stacked neatly against a bulkhead, their power cells long drained. But further in, the colony began to show scars that weren't just time. A corridor ended in a tangle of collapsed ceiling. But the damage wasn't from thermal stress, it was blast damage, the kind that ripples outward from a pressure detonation. The bulkhead was peeled back like foil. The edges bore streaks of melted alloy, frozen mid-drip. Draven swept his lamp across it slowly, his breath loud in the helmet. Whoever had been here last hadn't just abandoned Selene 9, they'd fought here. He skirted the collapse, unspooling more of his guide line. In low gravity, the movement felt almost graceful, but his heart thudded. Every new section of corridor felt like stepping deeper into someone's forgotten memory of violence. Half an hour later, the trunks led him to a chamber that might once have been a communal plaza. It was wide, with tiered seating around the walls like an amphitheater. In the center stood the skeletal frame of what had been a sculpture. Steel rods bent into a tree shape, its branches once fitted with bioluminescent bulbs. Most of the bulbs had shattered, but a few still clung to their sockets. Glinting faintly when his light hit them, Draven walked a slow circle round the sculpture. On the seats, he saw remnants that turned his stomach tight, faded pressure suit helmets with their visors, spider-webbed, fabric husks stiff with cold. He counted at least a dozen, positioned in ways that suggested they hadn't fallen, but had sat there until life had left. He whispered, "You stayed." The words fogged his visor for a second. He didn't linger. He pushed on toward the hangar, though now the silence of Selene 9 pressed heavier against his suit. The trunks widened into a massive bulkhead door. The words "Hangar Bay, authorized access only" were stenciled across in block letters. The paint faded but still legible. Draven exhaled through his teeth. He ran his palm across the seam. The metal was scarred, as if someone had tried to burn through once but failed. Whatever lay beyond had been sealed deliberately. He clipped his line to a handhold and inspected the control panel. Dead, of course, but when he pried it open with his tool, he found more than wires. He found a bypass key still jammed into the slot, snapped in half. Someone had tried to lock the door permanently. "Why close you off?" he muttered. He pulled a cable from his suit's toolkit and jacked into the dead panel. His HUD flickered with primitive diagnostic overlays. Most circuits were cold, but one thread of power still hummed faintly. His breath caught. Some subsystem down the line was alive. With delicate care, he rerouted the trickle of current into the door's actuator. The mechanism shuddered like a corpse twitching with residual electricity. A grinding sound filled the corridor as gears protested. Dust rained from the seams. Slowly, agonizingly, the door began to move. The darkness beyond was deeper than the corridors. Like ink, his suit light stabbed into it, revealing a cavernous space. The hangar. He stepped through. The air felt different here, though of course it wasn't air, just emptiness that carried weight. The hangar stretched vast, its ceiling lost in shadows. Along the edges sat derelict craft, mining crawlers with shattered legs, lifters with torn-out engines, cargo skiffs half dismantled. They looked like carcasses left for scavengers that never came. And then, under a tarp of gray dust at the far end, his light caught a shape that didn't belong to any mining rig. Sleek, curved lines, not blocky utilitarian ones. A nose angled for atmospheric entry. Wings that folded flush against a streamlined hull. He froze. It wasn't just a ship. It was newer than the colony. The paint on its hull hadn't flaked away like the others. The dust clinging to it was thinner, disturbed as if it had been sheltered longer. And across its side, stenciled letters spelled out something that sent a chill across his skin even inside the suit. Exodus 1. Draven's throat went dry. He walked toward it slowly, every step deliberate, his light bouncing off the curves of the forgotten craft. As he reached it, he brushed his glove across the hull. The dust came away easily, revealing polished alloy beneath. Not corroded, not dead. His suit pinged suddenly, a faint emission, power still flowing somewhere inside. The ship wasn't just preserved, it was waiting. Behind him, the silence of Selene 9 seemed to deepen, as though the ghosts were watching. Draven whispered to them, "Looks like you kept a secret." The ship loomed before him, an answer to questions no one alive had asked for centuries. And for the first time in a very long time, Draven Cole felt something dangerously close to hope. The Exodus 1 was no ordinary relic. Draven knew that the moment his hand brushed across its hull. The metal didn't feel like the cold, dead alloy of the other machines scattered through the hangar. This ship radiated something subtler, like a coiled spring, like a heartbeat hiding under a layer of dust. He circled it slowly, lamp cutting arcs through the gloom. The hull was unmarred by impacts, its joints seamless, its plating curved as though grown rather than forged. It dwarfed his skiff longer, broader, but with none of the heavy industrial clumsiness of the mining rigs. Sleek lines whispered of speed, of a craft meant not just to haul rock but to carry something precious across the stars. And across the bow, letters bold and sharp as though they had been painted yesterday. Exodus-1. The name shivered through him. He had heard whispers of projects like this back in the Outer Belt's corporate arcs, colony ships designed in secret during the waning years before Earth's fall. Rumors said they were meant to escape the wars entirely, to seed humanity elsewhere, far beyond the reach of greed and conflict. But no one had ever seen one. No one had proof they'd even launched, and here one was, sleeping, waiting. Draven found the hatch on the starboard side, a recessed panel flush with the hull, sealed tight. He pried at it with his suit tool until a sliver of black opening appeared, then slid his fingers inside and pulled. The hatch swung open without protest, exposing a narrow gangway. His lamp played over pristine walls. No frost, no corrosion, just smooth alloy and strips of luminescent paneling, dim but intact. The moment his boot crossed the threshold, his HUD flickered. A signal pulsed faintly across his comms band. Not random static, something structured, like a handshake. He froze. Exodus-1, he whispered. His breath fogged the visor. You're still alive. Inside, the silence was different. Not dead silence, not the brittle absence of Selene 9. This was a silence of anticipation, like the pause before a voice spoke. The corridors were narrow and sloped gently upward toward the command deck. Draven followed them, his tether line clicking behind him. The walls glowed faintly where his lamp touched, as if his presence coaxed the ship to wake. At last, he reached the cockpit. It was breathtaking. The canopy stretched wide, reinforced glass offering a panoramic view of the hangar beyond. Control surfaces gleamed as though fresh from fabrication. He brushed a hand across a console and felt warmth. Systems hummed faintly under his palm. Then the voice came, soft, genderless, ancient yet unbroken. Pilot presence detected. Draven's heart stuttered. He spun, but the cockpit was empty. The voice came from everywhere, woven into the very metal. Authentication incomplete. Pilot not recognized. Secondary protocol engaged. The console bloomed with light, symbols scrolling across in rapid succession. Draven leaned closer. The text was a blend of human standard glyphs and something stranger, streamlined, as though an AI had rewritten language to suit its own logic. Secondary protocol? He asked aloud, breathless. The voice answered immediately, calm and certain. Exodus protocol ready. Destination, unknown stars. Mission priority, continuation of species. Draven sat heavily in the pilot's chair. His gloved hands hovered over the controls. Continuation of species. This wasn't just a ship. It was an ark, a lifeboat meant to carry humanity across the black. He imagined its cryogenic chambers filled with colonists, or genetic libraries, or embryos waiting for a world to breathe. Yet the colony outside was silent. If Exodus-1 had been designed to launch, why had it stayed? Why had Selene 9 been abandoned while this miracle sat untouched? He keyed a prompt into the console. Status report. The voice responded without hesitation. Exodus-1 integrity, 98% functional. Core reactor, nominal. Propulsion, online. Navigation, incomplete. Pilot roster, empty. Draven's pulse quickened. This ship had never launched. No one had ever taken its helm. It had been left behind, forgotten. Why weren't you used? Draven asked. Silence stretched long enough that he thought it wouldn't answer. Then, primary crew failed to arrive. Lockdown initiated. Preservation state maintained. Draven leaned back, staring through the canopy at the cracked domes of Selene 9. Failed to arrive. Maybe they'd died in the riots. Maybe they'd sealed themselves in that amphitheater and waited for oxygen to run out. Whatever the reason, Exodus-1 had been abandoned, left to sleep for centuries. Until now. He exhaled shakily. His skiff was failing outside every hour, bleeding its reactor closer to death. This ship wasn't just a solution. It was a revelation. A vessel built to leap across stars, still alive, still waiting. But with that revelation came the weight of choice. If he claimed it, he wasn't just salvaging parts. He was taking command of humanity's forgotten ark. He swallowed, palms sweating inside the gloves. His voice trembled as he asked, "What happens if I take control?" The ship answered with serene inevitability. "Exodus protocol will commence. Coordinates, none. Mission, search and settlement." The canopy lights pulsed once, like the steady thrum of a heartbeat. The ship was ready to leave. All it needed was one living hand to guide it. Draven sat in silence, feeling the weight of Selene 9 pressing in behind him. The murals, the bones, the ghosts, all of them had stayed. All of them had failed to escape. And here he was, one man, with a decision too large for any single human. Draven Cole sat in the command chair of Exodus 1, his gloved fingers resting inches above the dormant flight controls. The hum of the ship was steady now, a quiet vibration that coursed through the deck plates and into his bones. It was a rhythm, ancient yet alive, like the breathing of some great beast that had only just stirred from slumber. Through the panoramic canopy, the fractured bones of Selene 9 sprawled across the lunar plain. Shattered domes, silent hydroponics gardens, murals painted by children who had never grown old. The colony was both tomb and memorial, and he could feel the weight of it pressing against the edges of his decision. He forced himself to speak, because silence felt like surrender. "Exodus, show me your records." The consoles flickered. Symbols danced across the screens, then resolved into log entries, fragments of a history sealed in code. Log 1, construction complete. Crew assembly pending. Log 07, supply shortages. Civil order deteriorating. Log 12, crew not arrived. Protocol shift. Preservation state. Draven leaned closer. The logs jumped ahead decades. Log 43, external communications lost. No contact with Earth or other colonies. Log 44, last transmission. Received, the fires have taken the sky. He shut the display off. He didn't need to see more. The Exodus had been built as humanity's lifeboat, and when the storm came, the crew meant to launch it never made it through. Now here it was, waiting centuries later for the first living hand to wake it. He ran his fingers across the controls. They felt responsive, supple, as though designed to anticipate movement. The HUD on his visor sensed automatically, overlaying navigation prompts. The AI's voice returned, calm and unwavering. "Pilot presence confirmed. Would you like to assume command?" The question cut him open. Assume command. Draven's life until now had been scavenging, surviving on scraps of dying technology, moving from derelict station to derelict outpost. He was a vulture feeding on the bones of a dead civilization. But the ship was not bones. This was possibility. He imagined igniting the engines, tearing free from Selene 9, leaving behind the broken colony for stars uncharted. Somewhere, out there, might be life, other survivors, worlds untouched by war, or nothing but endless black. His skiff outside was failing. He could try to patch it with the spindle, maybe coax a few more hours out of its reactor. But it wouldn't last. He knew it. Staying meant dying here. Leaving meant gambling everything on a ship no one had dared to fly. He stood, pacing the cockpit. His breath echoed inside the helmet, fast, uneven. "What if I'm not enough?" he muttered. One man, one pair of hands, one mind. This ship was meant for hundreds, thousands. The AI answered as if it had been waiting. "One is sufficient to begin. Systems will support pilot until settlement achieved." He closed his eyes, and memories rose unbidden. Kiro's laugh on the comms during long drift hours. The way his crewmates had trusted him with small decisions, which route through asteroid fields, which derelict to strip first. Small choices, never the world itself. He had failed them in the end. Everyone had. That was why he was alone. Continuation of species, Draven whispered. The words felt too heavy for one throat. Yet a strange fire kindled in him as he said them. If the world had left him nothing but ruins, perhaps the ship was not an accident. Perhaps survival itself had chosen him. He sat again, hands steady now. His glove hovered over the primary ignition rune. "Exodus," he said. "What happens if I launch?" "Launch will initiate Exodus protocol. Navigation will begin scanning for habitable systems. Mission: seed life where it may take root. Probability of success: 72%. 72%. Better odds than anything else left in the system. Draven looked out once more at Selene 9. The murals. The amphitheater where colonists had waited for their end. The broken domes glinting like ribs in the lunar dust. "If I'm the last," he whispered, "then let me be the first again." And he pressed the ignition. The ship shuddered. For the first time in centuries, its reactor awoke fully, roaring like a captive sun set free. Lights blazed across the cockpit, filling it with color.